Here we go.
G'day fans and welcome back to another exciting episode of Rip It Off the Card, the show where we talk about collectibles, collecting and all that stuff that's going on around the place. It's very exciting. It's a Wednesday night for the first time in absolute years. Well, it feels like years. We're not competing against the Book of Boba Fett. That series is finished. It's done. It's dusted. Get off Disney Plus. Come and join us and listen to us talk about collectibles. What do you reckon, Mr. Aaron?
It's been a fantastic week. It's been a collectible-filled week with me. I've had a couple of parcels come home, after all the delays we've had with international shipping sort of all rock up this week. And you know how in the old shows and cartoons, they're like, I caught you smoking a cigarette, so now you have to smoke the whole pack. Well, you'd think it'd be like that with me opening hundreds of toys every day. But you know what? Nah, bring more on.
Absolutely unbelievable. So we've got good old Ange joining us. We've got the Dicko joining us. Gavin's obviously just dropped something on the keyboard and it's just gone completely spazzo. So there you go. And good old Christy. Hello, and Mr. Greg King. Absolutely fantastic. So, and Mr. William have joined us right here, right now, which is particularly groovy. I like how you mentioned about taking things out of their packet. So for people out there, now, for people who are watching this on replay and don't know this already, so Aaron's got his own store, the Collectible Store, Shop 3, number 1 Main Street, Blackburn in Aaron's Collectibles. Now, I tend to hang out on Aaron's store on a Saturday, just loitering around doing as Dagses do. Last Saturday, Aaron, right? Now, I've got to put this to you, everybody out there, put me through immense psychological distress, right? To the point where therapy was like I was almost like dialing up on the quick dial. I need therapy because Aaron forced me. I tell you, forced me, not necessarily at gunpoint, but psychologically forced me to open up packets of Star Wars action figures. Not one, not two, shitloads. And I'll tell you what, as everyone was coming open, a part of me was dying inside. And what did Aaron say? Just keep opening them all up because we're just going to chuck them away for $12 each. I'm thinking, you don't understand. This is something that goes against my firm beliefs as a human being on this planet. And he just made me just do it. And I'm thinking, I'm totally distressed and I'm damaged now. What do you reckon, dude?
I thought it was so funny. I pulled out the phone and filmed it.
Rip it off, but I can't.
Let's just point out to everyone, these were carded, but they weren't mint amazing cards. They were kind of creased up and a bit dirty and everything. So it was better to have a mint, lovely loose figure than a dinged up card that looks not so great.
But no, I don't agree. I mean, even when I used to get collectibles from, I say collectibles like they're worth something, from Kentucky Fried Chicken in these cheap ass little plastic bags, I would still keep them sealed. But no, there I was having to rip them all open. It was quite distressing on my behalf. And you are right, it was ripped. It's like unbelievable. And Aaron forced me to do it, and he took great pleasure watching me suffer in pain. So
did you ever do this at Kentucky Fried Chicken? You know, when they had the Star Wars promos, I went in and I said, I would like a tub of chicken, but can I have the tub without the chicken on and the chicken on the side? Because I want to keep the tub and I don't want grease stains on the tub. And the staff look at you like you're mad. But I did that.
You did indeed. I've got, so exactly right. There's a comment that's come up here. I wasn't really planning to say this, but it's been mentioned anyway. So William has made a point about the documentary being sold to the US. So for those who don't know what that is, it's this. I've just pulled this up just very, very quickly. It's this the documentary called Batman and Me. It's actually a documentary about when I was a Batman collector, and it's appearing on North American, so it's not just the United States, but North American streaming services on March the 8th. I have no idea if and when it's ever coming here, and there's a possibility it may come out on DVD. So thanks, William, for that. So, for everybody here locally, it's kind of a bit stupid, but it's a documentary about myself, and there's another mate of mine involved talking about not just about collecting Batman merchandise, but the psychological impacts. I mean, I made a joke about it a few minutes ago, but this is quite serious. The psychological impacts that I experienced when I was dealing with collectibles and collecting Batman merchandise, and then my rationale behind doing it, and my rationale behind stopping it. So I thought I'd just mention that. So thanks for bringing that out. And there you go. So Christy, sorry, you going to say something?
I was just going to say, talking about doing well on DVDs and getting distributed, one of our regular contributors here, Mark, who's just said hi to everyone, he was in a documentary over lockdown called Fandom in Lockdown, which was a documentary done by Keith Barnfather on, you know, what you can do and what people collected and what fans did in lockdown. And that just yesterday or the day before won a major fan award. I don't know if it was a Saturn Award or at Sundance or something, but quite good for something on fandom. I'm sure Mark will put up in a second what the award was. So congratulations for being involved in that too.
Very, very cool. Now, I just mentioned a few months ago about how the distress I went through opening up all these collectible packets in your store. Chrissy just said, yeah, I just ripped my own heart out. Next time be kinder. So there you go. Probably not far from the truth. So there you go. Yeah, good old Rusky Bays. Yeah, party time. Excellent. Love it. Distressed me. Yeah, that's what everybody likes to see. Internationally infamous. Yeah, well, for all the wrong reasons usually. So there you go. And at least, hang on. At least Aaron didn't make you play with the Fabuland. Oh, I'd feel dirty after doing that. So
I actually did, because I made Chad display it at Brickvention and we sold half of it, and then I made Dags rearrange the display the next day.
Yeah,
so
unbelievable. So
I
there you go.
You were playing with Spankin' the Monkey.
Very, very good. Oh, don't start bringing up bloody old Spankin' the Monkey. Very good. Absolutely love it. All right, so we've got a big show tonight, as always. Everybody should be watching us tonight because there's no other shows on except your bloody SAS Australia and The Voice and all that other shit. So there you go. All the Olympic Games is on, so I will excuse you for that. So there you go. All right, so we should move on because we've got lots to discuss as per the usual. It's a bumper show as always. Russell's singing songs now, is he? I was like, oh my God, you can hear the dogs howling from here. All right, let's get into it, but otherwise we'll never get the show done. It's time for a bit of news. Oh, here we go. Hang on. Come on, you can do it. All right, so what are we looking at, Mr. Aaron?
Well, it's all Star Wars and Doctor Who this week, isn't it? So a little bit for you, a little bit for me.
Yeah, so I'll start with the crappy stuff and work our way up. So let's go with the Doctor Who show.
Now, as you would know if you watch this show regularly, we always highlight the new figures coming out from Character for their classic Doctor Who range. This is an announcement from yesterday. They announced it and it went on sale yesterday. It's the three Silurians, the Silurian triad from Warriors of the Deep. Now, what's unusual about this, the Doctor Who line is quite an expensive line to produce, and lately they haven't had as many people, as in retailers, taking it up. So they've only been able to really do figures where you get a new head and then they can use the sculpts from other bodies and repaint them and sort of cobble together a figure. But these are pretty much three brand new figures. They announced them and went on sale at the same time. There's, I think, a limit of 5,000 units. They're on the Character option site. I bought 6 units straight away for myself, so we will have a couple in the shop probably. These are pretty exciting. I love them. They're great figures, and they come from the era of Doctor Who that we're going to be looking at later today. So that was pretty fortuitous. What do you think of those, Dags? You'd have them in your house, wouldn't you?
I'm trying to think of a really, really smart comeback line, and I'm trying to think, I went out with girlfriends who looked a bit like that at one point. I'm not going to say that. That's just bad Dags. All right, there you go. I'm just going to wind the clock back. Mark has mentioned about the show, the documentary, Geek Fest Toronto 2022 award, and numerous others recently. Well, you're doing better than me because none of my stuff ever got onto film festivals. So well done, Mr. Mark. You are the coolest dude in the room at the moment. So well done. Sorry, dude.
Dags' stuff just gets investigated by the police.
As well one should do. Did you buy any of them? Yeah. I'll tell you what, the problem I've got now is, like, when it comes to Christmas time this year or my birthday or whatever, I can imagine some people in this show deliberately buying Doctor Who stuff to give to me to say, there you go. And, of course, I've got to leave it mint in box and all the rest. It's like, you guys could really play with my mind if you want to. So don't do it. All right.
What will happen next is all the Doctor Who fans that watch the show will start friending you, thinking you're a big wheel in Doctor Who fandom.
Mate, I got cred points like you wouldn't believe. So there you go. And just quietly, just between all of us here, you and me, today I got friended by the coolest Doctor Who dude in the entire universe. It's not Aaron because he's just not up on that level, but the guy who runs the Australian Doctor Who fan club has been doing it for decades now, and he friended me on Facebook. Oh my God, I was like I was virtually like leaking everywhere because I was just so excited. So yes, very, very cool.
I feel
you guys can figure out who that is. So what?
I feel cheated on.
Well, Take a number of weight in the queue. What can I say? All right, so we've gone through the crappy Doctor Who stuff. Yeah, got these ugly aliens. Yeah, bullshit. Let's move on to something that's very exciting, but it's not as cool as what you did last week, but it's the next best thing. Sure enough, they've legalized, if that's such a word, the friggin' starfighter from what is effectively the Book of Boba Fett. What do you reckon?
Yeah, so we were pretty spot on, and we beat Lego by a week. But Lego have officially announced that the N1 starfighter, the Mandalorian's new ship, is coming out in brick form, and really is just a reissue of the Naboo fighter, but they've got rid of all the yellow bricks and replaced it with grey bricks, I guess. I mean, it is an updated design, and I guess it comes with some cool figures. It looks pretty good. I think it will be a more popular ship this time round than it was when it was originally released, though. What do you think of it, Dags?
Yeah, I was going to ask you, did it actually come out originally as from Phantom Menace?
It did. So you could get it, and they've actually released a Ultimate Collector's Series one as well, which is sort of the nicer next step up. And apparently it was their lowest selling Ultimate Collector Series set. So obviously that makes it one of the rarer ones. This one comes out with a whole lot of new figures. I think the figures that come with it are great. You've got Grogu, the Mandalorian, and I love how they've given him just a black rod as a lightsaber blade to represent the dark saber. That's a bit of a cheap way of doing it. And then you've got the other figures there. What's the name of the droid? I know it debuted in a game before.
Yeah, it was. I think its name is PD or BD or something like that. So you are right, and you got Palimoto on the right hand side.
Yeah,
particularly groovy. In fact, I personally think the Grogu figure just by itself could end up just outstripping everything in terms of value because it is. It does look pretty good, as Thomas has said. Yeah, great figures. They do look kind of groovy. Yeah. Thomas reckons also that the ship looks a bit sterile. Yeah, I guess it does. But what we suggested was that the thing only appeared like 3 weeks ago in the episodes, and it's out already as a collectible. And it's like they don't muck around. And the funny thing is, they didn't give it a name. So it's just the N1 Starfighter. It's not Razor Crest 2 or something like that. Because when we were mucking around with ours last week, we didn't know what it was going to be called. So even these guys don't know what it's called. So, yeah, interesting. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I think it's a good set. It'll be interesting to see how many sets are released to do with the Mandalorian, how many sets are released to do with the Book of Boba Fett. Because you notice that one is a Mandalorian set, even though it's only appeared in the Book of Boba Fett.
Yeah, that's a very good point because strictly speaking, it hasn't arrived in the Mandalorian series yet. So, and I reckon they were kind of confused, thinking, well, it's the Mandalorian's Din Djarin's ship, but it's not actually meant to be in the series of Boba Fett. It's in the other series. But I reckon the marketing people must have had their brains like leaking out their ears. But they also thought, well, the Mandalorian is a far more popular series than what the Book of Boba Fett was. Hence the reason why they put the Mandalorian logo in there. So strictly speaking, this is actually incorrect. So if they reproduce this with the correct logo saying the Book of Boba Fett, N1 Starfighter, that would possibly be worth more. What do you reckon?
Or we can have it on the show and do a how to improve the price of your collectibles and modify the box to make it correct, maybe. But do you know what? If a kid sees that, they're not going to worry what the name of the show is really, are they?
No, totally agree with you. So there you go. Yeah, Grogu can be eaten by the Rancor. Joe. Yeah, we actually thought about Slave 2. Would it be classed as Slave 2? But I mean, it's the wrong character. I mean, Boba Fett ship is Slave 1. Din would have no reason to call this one Slave 2, so that makes no sense whatsoever. That's why I thought a new name, just call it Razor Crest, because the original one blew up. So just use this one. So very, very cool. Yeah, good stuff. All right, but sticking with the old Star Wars thing, look at this bloody Lego, and here we go.
Yeah, so this is a Book of Boba Fett Lego set. This is Jabba's, well, I guess Boba's palace now, but yes. Jabba's palace throne room. And they have done various sets before. And I don't know if you know this, the original set for Jabba's palace was pulled because I think it looked too much like a mosque or the design. So they were getting a bit of heat over that. So rather than change it, they pulled it. And there hasn't been a Jabba the Hutt palace for a while. And now they've released one. And this is another interesting one because the choice of figures it comes with, there are some cool ones. And there's some figures I kind of also thought, well, there were probably better choices than that.
Yeah, so, who's this down here?
I was going to ask you because I thought Dags will know that, the girl with the pink hair. I don't know. Maybe it's Holdo before she dyed her hair purple. I don't know.
That's actually probably not a bad guess when you sit and think about it. And I don't know who this guy is here, but I did notice it's written on the box, but I didn't zoom into the picture on the box to have a look. So,
Yeah.
because it's up here, but it's hidden by the
Yeah.
picture. So, and dare I say, even the magnifying glass of truth won't be able to tell me. Nah, it's all blurry. So,
see, isn't this a great news show? We bring you stuff, but we don't research it enough to tell you who the figures are. But that's kind of all part of this show. We're flying by the seat of our pants. But I think it is quite a good set. I thought it looked like Holdo too.
But why would Holdo be doing in friggin' Boba Fett's palace? In fact, in this timeline, she's still like in her 20s or something, so early 30s or something. But anyway.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe she wandered over. Maybe she used to have a job as a pole dancer at the Sanctuary Cantina.
Good on you. That is a weird one, and I don't get it. But I like how they've added in his back to tank posse up there, his penthouse, as it were. But I mean, it looks good, and there's a lot of stuff in it, a lot of color, and some groovy stuff. And it's got good old Bib Fortuna in there. I don't know why you'd need Bib Fortuna, considering he wasn't even in the series. He was killed before then. But
Well, you can pull all the Lego heads off, so you can do the big Bib Fortuna head removal where he blasts him in the face. I like how Fennec Shan's rifle is a rifle, and you put a little bit extra on the end to make it super long, which is cool. And then you've got a couple of other figures. So if you've got the original Jabba's palace, at least you've got a couple more figures you can add to that to beef it out a bit too.
I like the fact her gun is so long that if you attach it to her, she'll never be able to stand up. Right, she'll always tilt forward because of the weight of it. And I looked at this thing and I said, "What the hell's that down there?" And I said, I thought it was like there's like a Maori in there or something, because it looked like Maori sort of tattoo on the face. But who's that meant to be? So who are it? Oh God,
it might be a Weequay. I don't know.
But at least the Gamorrean guard looks good. He looks very schmick, I've got to say. So there you go.
Yeah. So I still think it's a good set, and you get a classic Boba Fett figure.
Yeah, totally agree. Where are we? Space Gladys? Yeah, could be. Gavin said it's related to the pink shorts guy. That's a very, very in joke. That was the sound guy who worked on A New Hope, and he just wore pink shorts because it was in the desert, and everybody said, "Oh, let's do a costume of that." Do you get the Moss Vespa gang? Let's hope not. The Mod Squad, as we call them. So there you go. Joe said from a deleted scene. She's got hair like that. I'm glad it was deleted. And we get to kill Bib over and over again. So there you go. If you get too excited, you'll probably need to wear a bib. So there you go. And she said, Feeling Dancer, pink. I think it is pink hair. Feeling. I have no idea what that is. So maybe it's from the Sanctuary Cantina, but that makes no sense because clearly we're in the Boba's palace. And unless you put in the rat dude who's chasing the rat droids running around. Oh, geez, I don't know. It's just ridiculous.
Was there a pink-haired dancer from the special edition of Jabba's? There was the three backup.
There was, I can't think of their names, but she wasn't pink, and it's a different timeline and it's a different show. So anyway, I don't get it. So I think they might have just invented it. So anyway, very, very good. All right, so that's all very good, very, very exciting. And so get some Lego into your kids. You can build your bits and pieces, have a whale of a time. And while you're doing all that, run out and buy yourself some Black Series chrysanthemum stuff.
Now, this is really interesting because I think having it fresh from the series is good to launch a figure, but they've done the figure that is more in common with the comic book first appearance and his appearance in the comics. So I think this figure looks more like an ape from Planet of the Apes than it does look like Black Chrysanthemum, what we've kind of just seen on the series. So it'd be interesting to see how well received this is and how much fans like it. I mean, it's halfway between a Wookiee and a guerrilla soldier, I think.
Yeah, I totally agree. And Ange did say he did find that name on the Lego box. So we'll have to Wikipedia that and find out what the bloody hell was that. The Vial said the Greta was in the Girl in Jedi, but there was three of them, okay? And she was just one of the three. But if that's you're talking about with the red hair, that's fine. But I don't think that's the character in the Lego. So looking at this, I looked at this and I thought, it's bloody horrible. I don't like it at all. And I think the timing doesn't work because it's come out, as you've said, based on the comic book version. But a lot of people don't know that version. They only know the Book of Boba Fett version. So realistically, you would try and match it up with the TV series. So I don't think it was a very smart move at all. And I personally don't think it's very good. So there you go.
Yeah, I think almost if you put all three of those figures together, it looks like a band kind of like Kiss because they're all in these moves that look like they're holding instruments. That's just me being funny. But
That's cool. Strong 8-planet vibes there. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Actually, it does look a bit like that. And Christy said it has more like a gorilla than a Wookiee. Yeah. So, because when you sent me through the pictures today, I looked at it, I thought that looks crap, but I didn't even twig that it was based on the comic version, which is back here. So,
yeah.
so if it's based on the comic, it probably looks 100% correct. Because the thing I thought is that why is he carrying a bowcaster? Because Chrysanthemum doesn't carry a bowcaster in the Book of Boba Fett, but in the comic, apparently does.
Here's an obscure one. It looks like he's raided Sean Connery's wardrobe from Zardoz too.
Yes, he does. Yeah, exactly right. Anyway, maybe they'll do a reissue and they'll do the Book of Boba Fett version, and of course that will look particularly spectacular. Good stuff. Yeah, Wook-rilla, love it. Speaking of things that are absolutely spectacular, maybe not Black Chrysanthemum so much, but this is an absolute winner.
Useless Pop of the Week!
Ha!
So we're sorry again if we're bringing you pops that some people love and think we disrespect, and other people hate and probably wouldn't want to see them. So we tread the middle and just pull out one every week that we think is a useless pop. And I thought this one was particularly useless. What did you think of this one, Dags?
Oh, usually there are some that we put on the show. You can go, oh yeah, you can kind of get it, but this one really is just the point of just stupidity.
So I think it's another one. If you hadn't put the box there to see who it was, would you really know that that was meant to be John Lennon? Now, I don't know what they're going for here. What do you think?
I have no words, seriously. I mean, all my words are all expletives, so I'm just going to pass it back to you.
Well, this one almost borders on disrespectful for me, because if they did a John Lennon figure, which they have done, just a regular one, fair enough. But this is like a white one. I don't know why they've done it white. Maybe his ghost, but then he's got psychedelic freak out eyes in his glasses. And I just kind of thought, who sits there and goes, you know what a Beatle fan will want? The ghost of John Lennon with psychedelic glasses.
I like what Bob said. Yeah, good to see Bob joining us. Throw it to the vial. Well, it is vile just by itself when you sit and think about it, doesn't it? So looks like Vladimir Lenin. I like that one. You're right. Oh, I get it. Maybe it's meant to be like a ghost, which means that's pretty poor taste when you sit and think about it. Gavin said White Album. That's stringing a bit of a long bow though, trying to put those two together, because it wasn't a John Lennon album. That was a Beatles album. So you have to do the other the other three guys in white as well. So, but that's Dicko. Oh, I love it. We can only imagine. Oh, boom, boom. Oh, he just cracked the funny. So there you go. So,
I left the low hanging fruit. The comment that I thought everyone was going to do was like, "Come on, Funko, just let it be."
Jesus Christ. Well, it sort of fits if you know about his lifestyle. Lucy, anyone? Sky with Diamonds, but I agree with you. You can hear Jesse the Jeffro. Hear the goes, it's ridiculous. So anyway, so
do you know what? If we're going to do a pop version of the Beatles and you wanted to make them look a bit psychedelic, just do like a Yellow Submarine version. You know, with the colours from that everyone sort of knows where it's from, and a homage. I saw that and I thought it was an instant contender for useless pop of the week.
Yeah, and it is. And the thing is, I agree with you. You just simply cannot tell what it is. And I reckon if you can't tell what it is, then clearly it is complete tripe. So there you go. All right, so there you go. We're actually a bit of a fan of talking about things that are complete tripe. So now it's time for this. That was very, very soft, but there you go. So he's got his brand new intros that's been fixed up again and shortened down. But the quality of the show is segment is just as good as ever.
It is. We've gone with a new intro because the other one slowed it down a bit too much. But just because we've shortened the intro doesn't mean we've shortened the segment. And this week is a good week because we've managed to open up dialogue with another company in China or Hong Kong or somewhere over there, and it's about our Stargate. Now, I sent off to the people who made the Hellraiser box and the Stargate an explanation of what's happening because we didn't get anything. The Hellraiser box didn't get back to us. Here's what I wrote, though. Dear Lane Designs, I recently ordered a Stargate model from you and was disappointed to receive a star and butterfly necklace instead. I was wondering if you could address this error before I make a PayPal reversal. Did you know your shop is now closed? All the best, Aaron. And that's because the link shows this now. Sorry, this shop is currently unavailable. So they've got all their money and they have disappeared with it, they think. So I didn't think I'd get anything back, but I did. Hello, Aaron. Thank you for bringing this to our attention. It is lucky you got this necklace. It is beautiful and lucky. Don't do a pay reversal. I am sure you will be happy with necklace. Our shop is closed for reconstruction and holiday. Thank you, Lane Design Customer Service Team. So this is sounding very like the customer service team I had dealings with before. And I tell you what, I actually wasn't feeling lucky to get the beautiful and lucky necklace. So I sent back, hello, dear friends at the Lane Design Customer Service Team. I am very happy to hear from you. I ordered a Stargate miniature prop replica and got a cheap necklace. I don't want the necklace. I want the Stargate. Can you please let me know if you are sending a replacement or a refund? So I was quite direct. I wasn't playing around with them this time just to see what I could get.
All right, I'm going to cut you off right there. So, all right, so everybody's watching this show, you just read the correspondence that's been occurring, all right? And clearly, so for those of the backstory, Aaron ordered the Stargate. He's got the necklace instead. He's obviously lodged a bit of concern. Hey, you've sent the wrong item. We actually originally thought they may have sent it by accident, right? So the dialogue has commenced, right? What do you think out there happened next? I'm going to take a quick sip of a drink before I show the slide.
Yes.
I didn't know about this until today, right? But he's contacted Aaron's contacted the company, and now we have experienced issues before with other companies, and and they just won't fess up to what's going on. But what do you reckon these guys had to say? So you're right, Joe. It is right out of the SC customer service playbook. Yeah, exactly right. All right. So what do you think they said? They said this.
Hello, Aaron. I do not understand. Most customers' complaint is they receive nothing. You received a necklace. That is beautiful. I hope you are happy with this. It is lucky you received it and will be great for your woman daughter. No need to mail again. You got a product. So there you go. Like, you order something, and if you get something, you're lucky, and don't bother them again.
Isn't that absolutely unbelievable? Now, Aaron, before we went on air, Aaron and I discussed it because I hadn't seen this stuff until he sent it through this afternoon, right? And I said, they obviously think if the SJ guys are sitting next door, they don't send anything at all. So just be thankful you got something. And it's like, you do wonder, and we've discussed this previously in this segment, how many people will say, I'm just not going to go any further, because clearly they're not going to buckle and go, oh, sorry, we sent you the wrong product, we'll fix it. It's like, no, you've got something, shut up, piss off. And it's like the absolute gall of somebody to do that. It's like, it's just unbelievable. So Thomas has said it is outrageous, and that's the thing. And they would have typed that with a smile on their face again, dude, you got something, it's all good. Just because it's completely the wrong product is totally irrelevant. I was like, oh my goodness. Dear. Russell's right. Yeah, threatening with a demonic curse. Absolutely unbelievable.
Well, it is one of those things. I do wonder if they're obviously putting it in a translator and it's getting translated from whatever language they're into our language. And if it is coming off a bit harsher, then it actually is. Now, I only got that sort of recently, so we will continue with that dialogue and see how far we can stretch it out and see how outrageous it does get. But they've basically said, did I send one back after that? I think I
you did. I was going to, it's more about what you're going to do. So just go through quickly if you wouldn't mind.
Hello, dear friends at Lane Customer Services. I do not like crappy necklace, and it is not worth $69. I want to get the Stargate prop miniature I ordered. Please do not tell me I was lucky to receive anything. This is unlucky. If I got what I received, it would be lucky. If you do not reply with a way to fix the situation, I will open a PayPal claim. So that's where we are, and I sent them back to that today, and I haven't heard anything back. But we will continue to report on our dialogue. And thank you, Greg King, for finding these items and getting us to order them so we can meet with these interesting people.
This is I love this one from Jeffro. So obviously the person you're dealing with, their name is Kylie, because as you can say, you should be saying lucky. Now, for those who never saw our episodes last year, and obviously the people watching this live probably have, but the ones who are watching on replay didn't. The last time Aaron was getting railroaded like this, he actually wrote back to the company and said, I've stuck a virus on your computer. It's going to corrupt your database and all the rest of it. And they believed it. So there you go. And you're absolutely right, Colin. First Frankie first rule of acquisition: once you have their money, don't give it back, and that's exactly what happened. So unbelievable. So isn't that just? Oh yeah. Anyway,
Yeah.
so there you go. And you got a final thing you wanted to show here. I'm not sure what this was meant to be.
And this is probably only funny to Greg King himself, but he has been doing so many searches for the show that Facebook has actually been throwing up on his page things that are recommended for him. And one of them was a reverseless dress and also some gardening stuff. So not exactly what we're looking for the show, but good to see that you're trying, Greg.
Isn't that absolutely unbelievable? So there you go. I love it. Yeah, imagine if the Star Trek Universal Translator was like the Facebook one. Yeah, exactly right. So yes, we'll have to watch it. And of course, the people dealing with this don't know that this is coming onto a show. So they're providing all this entertainment without actually realizing it. But this is legitimate. That's the thing. That wasn't made up. That was the real thing. And it's just,
last year I told them we had a review show viewed by millions of people, and they said they actually watched it, and I think they did because they said, you lied. You don't have millions of people. You have 10.
And that's where the soul Greg King came from. So, all right, we're going to move on. All right, so it's absolutely unbelievable, crappy necklace stories to something that's even particularly more crappy. It's time for, of course, the Lord Vile's Vile File. Here you go.
Yes. Haven't we gone on a journey with the Vile File? It started off by highlighting I guess, dodgy products. And now it's just like juvenile humor, wall to wall.
Here's a question. Gavin said, ask for a butterfly necklace. You might actually get the Stargaze. There you go. Love it. All right. Where do we go with the Vile File, Mr. Aaron?
Well, let's see what's in the Vile's mailbag this week. So, anyone who wants to send anything in is welcome to, and we will take a look at it and pass it on to the Vile if it's worthy of his vile eyes.
Very good.
And we got this mail. Dear Master Vile, while on my regular rounds op shopping, I found this old VHS tape, Do the Macarena, totally nude. I thought it should feature on your segment. What do you think? From Susan Reynolds, who I think has sent us stuff before. Now, this is a legit VHS from back in the day that I looked up and then watched a couple of times and then watched a couple of times more before I passed it on to the Vile to see what he thought. Have you ever watched any Naked Macarena videos, Dags?
You know what? Quite to be frankly honest, I'm trying to cut down.
So you may remember from last year, we went to the Vile video vaults and he showed us some of his horrible acquisitions. And most of them, I think, either William or his brother had in their own collection. So that says something. But we bring you now Electric Boogaloo, the Vile Vault Volume 2. And this isn't so much looking at bad video covers. It's like just really unusual tapes. And because someone sent in a tape that had totally nude on, the Vile has decided to get out his tapes and violate them by adding, I guess, extra subtitles to create a more amusing version of the video for him to watch.
Love it. And regarding the first video that we saw, the Vile has asked, can you get them as action figures? Yes. Absolutely love it. Nude Arena. Yeah, absolutely fantastic. All right. So, yes, videotapes that you can actually add extra subtitles to. So, what would the Vile have in his collection? Well, let's see.
So, here's some of the delights from the Vile's video vaults. There's oh gosh, there's Bunanetics, which is basically aerobics for your butt. We've got Bunanetics, the buttocks workout, and then Bunanetics 2. And another one, which is really interesting for collectors, and this must be why the Vile has it in his collection, identifying machine-made marbles. Which I guess if you're a marble collector, you need to know the difference between a handmade and a machine-made marble. But I tell you what, that's probably only in the Vile's collection.
So the important thing is when you read machine-made marbles, don't look at this image here because then you're mixing up your videos. So you don't want to cross-contaminate your videos or cross the stream. So there you go. So what are you suggesting? We should add a subtitle to these particular videos. Is that what you're trying to say, Mr. Aaron?
Not that we should. The Vile has actually gone and spiced them up just for Susan Reynolds. So Bunanetics, totally nude. Bunanetics in the nutty. And identifying machine-made marbles, tackle out.
Absolutely love it. Joe has asked Bunanetics, what's that? Oh, come on, Joe, get with the program, son. You got to just watch some. It's the buttocks workout. So there you go. And of course, that's the American term. If you it's the Australian term,
I think the
arsenetics would be be the go. So there you go.
I think the
Joe's asked about the marbles. It's like, well, yeah, it's important to get your marbles together, old son. So there you go. Interest by Ginger and Amber lid on. Yeah, man. You're a bad dude.
I think the middle video there is quite interesting because it's one of those optical illusions where people couldn't see if it was a gold dress or a blue dress. You look at that and you can't tell if it's boobs or a butt.
Yeah, totally right. Absolutely fantastic. So they're in the nutty. You can't get more Australian than that. Anyway, we're moving along.
So here's some other videos that he has in his collection that probably aren't so vile until he jazzes them up. But we've got Star Trek 2, The Wrath of Khan, Ewok Adventure, Caravan of Courage, and one that you wouldn't really expect in the Viles collection, and that's your good old Anne of Green Gables.
All right, this is Aaron's. Aaron, his humor coming right out here. So go for it, old son.
So we now have the Vile has Star Trek 2, Wrath of Khan, Ponfar XXX rated edition, Caravan of Courage, Ponfar X-rated edition, and of course Anne of Green Gables, Ponfar X-rated edition, which probably you can't get anywhere else on the internet now. Although if you look at it enough, you might.
Yes, as Russell said, not Caravan of Courage. Yeah, especially Caravan of Courage. So yes, very good.
It really does show you people's where people's allegiances is, because you've got Russell going not Caravan of Courage and Christy not Anne. So
actually, what I think is funny, you got the X-rated edition, but you still got the G down the bottom there. So there you go. Very, very cool.
Now the Vile has a collection of out of copyright tapes. Now I don't know if you've ever seen these dags, but back in the day, there's a 50-year copyright on those old Warner Brothers cartoons, and then as soon as they go out of copyright, all these companies whacked them out on the cheapest videos they could, and you could go into the $2 shop and the reject shop and get all of these old cartoons for a couple of bucks, and they are on shoddy tapes with the most horrendous cover designs. And you've got Kids Toons Video, Bugs and Bunny and Buddies, and then you've got Woody Woodpecker and Friends, and this Bugs Bunny at the end, he looks particularly I don't know what he's thinking there.
He's been smoking the wacky tobacco by the looks of it. And it's like, yeah, it's not what's up, Doc, but it's what's up, Doc. So yes, indeed.
Let's see the version that's in the Viles collection.
Indeed.
So, Kids Toons Video, Bugs and Buddies, Daffy Does Dallas, and then we've got Woody Woodpecker's Pecker Party, and of course Bugs Bunny, The Last Temptation of Bugs.
It's very funny. I just friended Dallas Jones today, so there you go. Bugs is smoking, absolutely true. So there you go. The Pecker Party. How would you interpret that?
Well, I was thinking more of Daffy Does Dallas really does. The best scene is where they go, "What's up, Doc?" Yeah,
it's very good. You remember the TV show Perfect Match?
Yeah.
They used to have Dexter on board there. I did see a cartoon one that said Debbie Does Dexter, and that was definitely not kid friendly, that particular image. But let's move on, shall we? So there we go.
So here's some interesting stuff, and it really is that sort of B movie bargain bin. The weekly videos at the video library. You've got Godzilla versus Megalon, Drugs Bunny, Fart the movie, which I've never seen, might be interesting. And of course, you've got the Warriors of the Wind. All of them would probably qualify for being on the Vile file before the Vile beef them up anyway, I would think.
You know what that one over there looks like? It's like when you draw eyes on your chin and you get photographed upside down. So yes, there you go. All right, so what do you reckon these should be?
So you've got Godzilla versus Megalodon, topless mud wrestling, Fart the movie, 50 Shades of Brown, and then you've got Warriors of the Wind, Fart the movie, Part 2.
Fantastic. 50 Shades of Brown. Yes, Fart the movie. The movie they said could never be made. Just because you make it doesn't mean people are going to watch it. So
I love how whoever did the graphics for Fart sort of made it out of gassy letters. I mean, they're geniuses, aren't they?
Can someone see if it's on Wikipedia? I'm curious to see if there's an entry for Good Old Fart the movie. So there you go. It obviously stands for something because it's an abbreviation. So, but either way, they said it could never be made, and it was. So there you go. So what are you trying to tell us about all these particular videotapes there, Mr. Aaron?
Well, all of those videotapes have been assessed and reassessed and recategorized and absolutely, totally violated.
There we go. Absolutely fantastic. So there you go. I like this. How far it had a lot of follow through. Yes, exactly right. It had a great following. The people who made that movie. So there you go. Good stuff. Absolutely fantastic. Oh, how groovy is this? Warriors of the Wind would have made a better sequel than to Gone with the Wind. Oh, I suppose it would have, So it can be interpreted in many different ways. So there you go. So that's the old Viles video collection. And the funny thing is, at no point did William say, "Yeah, I've got some of those tapes at home sitting in the collection ready to go." So love it. Very, very cool. All right, let's move on to something very, very exciting. Get your thinking caps out, kids. What do you reckon everything has gone for?
Ooh, baby, do you know that's what...
All right, so we're talking about eBay stuff. So what do we got talking about tonight, Mr. Aaron?
Well, because this is a bit of a Doctor Who episode, we're looking at Doctor Who stuff that's gone on eBay, and there's been a couple of interesting collections that have been sold in Australia the last month. So some of the stuff that's come up, probably people here would have seen, because I know there's a few Doctor Who collectors watching tonight. Again, this week, one of these items I won myself.
Ooh, there you go. And remember last week, guys, we got it completely wrong as to what we thought he bought. So, all right, so here we go. Got some items. You just got to work out what they sold for or what Aaron bought one for. So what are we talking about tonight, Mr. Aaron?
So one of the things a lot of people collect with Doctor Who is the original hardback books. Now, we've talked before about the Target books, which are the paperbacks, but the hardback books mainly went into libraries because they were a bit out of pocket money range at the time. The Target books were usually around $2 or $3, where the hardbacks were $30 or $40. So a big difference, which means a lot of the ones that turn up are ex-library, but these are 4 non-ex-library books from the 80s.
Very good stuff, Doctor. Not ex-library. All right, so Rusky Babes has kicked us. How's this for a range? Rusky Babes has gone for $2. That's 50 cents a book. Gavin has said $290. There's a big change, isn't it? $4.75 for Mr. Thomas. What does everybody else think? Don't look it up. Don't Google it. Don't cheat. Just take a guess. Angela said 42, which is particularly groovy. So we've got a bit of a range there, and they do look pretty schmicky. They're like new. Interpret like new any way you like, fun enough. So there you go. Yeah, mint condition. I like it. It says mint condition, but like new. So interpret that any way you want. Where was I? I think Kelvin said 25. Christy has said 65. Particularly good stuff. All right, so what do you reckon they went for? They went, hang on, Mr. Bob has chucked in a $390. So we got a bit of a range here between $2 and $390. Very, very groovy. William has come in at 150. Colin has said 20. So there's definitely some good stuff there. All right, so Doctor Who books mint condition. I think there's only the 4 of them, which is particularly groovy. What do you reckon they went for? They went for a whopping $1,350 effing dollars. I bet you didn't buy this.
No, this wasn't one I bought. But this is indicative of the way that hardbacks are shooting up in value, especially the non-ex-library one. There is obviously a lot more collectors than there are books in this condition out there. So when the nice ones are coming up online, they're going for a premium. I haven't seen any Australians do it lately, but in the US and England, I've seen some of these books go for up to about $6,000 just for one book.
I'll tell you who didn't get it. Hang on, sorry. Rusky Babes at $2. So, Russell, you got no idea what your books are worth. But I tell you, the worst part is that Thomas got it at $4.75, but he's got to cough up an extra 800 and something bucks to buy them. That'll barely get you a couple of covers at that rate. Isn't that insane? Oh my God, dude, yeah, what's the deal?
It's crazy. They do go for quite a bit, and there's a lot of collectors.
Yeah. I'm waiting for someone to say, yep, I've got these in my collection, and they're looking really Mickey Mouse cool, all because they're not ex-library. How about that? Unbelievable.
Now, here's an interesting item. Like I said, there was a few Doctor Who collections that have gone on eBay the last month or two, and this, I think, was one of the rarest items that went up. Now, this is interesting because it's a Tom Baker cast postcard, but it's an ABC TV one. So this is from about 1978, and if you wrote away to the ABC and said, I'm a big Doctor Who fan, they might send you one of these back. Or if you went to the show where there's an ABC stall, they might give you one of these. Now, these are quite rare and do not turn up very often.
Very, very cool. I like what Greg said. Doctor Who hardbacks are currently getting top dollar based on the last sale. You think? So there you go. Unbelievable. All right. So for this card, the Doctor Who card from Tom Baker, 1978. Andrew said 2. Marcus said 88. I'll just pause for a minute while people get their dollars together. Christy said 101. Colin has said $5,000. Holy guacamole. And don't forget, his condition is acceptable. So, but yeah, the last item, I don't think anybody would have expected it went for as much as it did. So you never know, Colin, you could be in for with a chance. Kelvin has knocked a 0 off Colin's price and said 500. William has said 150. Thomas said 450. Bob has said 300. And violating Tom Baker, as one should, is the vial at $250. Gavin has said 750. Yes, very interesting. ABC TV Tom Baker card 1978 in acceptable condition. 13 bids. Holy guacamole. So there's obviously a bit of interest in this. So what do we reckon it went for, kids, based on the last item that we sold? It went for, and it's in acceptable condition, it went for a whopping $66.
So that was the item I bought, and it's already turned up. And like I said,
it wasn't a gold chain by chance that turned up, was it?
Well, I used to have it years ago. I've had a few of them, but haven't seen one in a long time. So I thought I'd better pick one up, and I thought it went quite cheap for what I thought it was going to go. So there you go. The Doctor Who card joins the.
Oh, hang on. There we go. Look at that.
So there's the Indiana Jones card from last week and the Doctor Who card from this week. So basically, I'm sponsoring our own segment at the moment.
Doing very, very good. So anyway, we said Mark got it for 88, but he gets some change too, which is kind of groovy. So like an $18 refund or something. So no, nicely done. Okay, good stuff. Well done indeed. Big screen Aaron. Oh, I love that. What? Like you didn't get a whole lot of dead Jedi. There's always room for a Star Wars quote in a Doctor Who episode, isn't there? Absolutely love it. All right, let's move on to this one.
So this is interesting because it's a bit hard to see what that is there, but that's the spine of a series of books. Now, everyone knows about piecework magazines and books and toys where you go to the newsagents once every 2 weeks and you buy a book. And the very first one is $2.95, and then the next one is $4.95, and then they've got you addicted and they jack them up to $19, $25, $29. So someone has collected the entire set. So this is the complete history, the complete collection, brand new sealed, of all of those books. So you've got every single story from William Hartnell right through to Peter Capaldi. So all the ones that count. If you buy these individually, they cost quite a lot. If you bought them as a set later, do you think you'd get them for cheaper, or do you think you'd be paying the same price?
Regarding the last item, Mark said he was actually bidding on it, but he gave up. So there you go. So you outdid him. And as Bob said, I love this one. Yeah, you lucky man, no share with woman or daughter. And Joe said, yeah, this segment's rapidly becoming what Aaron bought. Yeah, exactly right. Very, very cool. All right, complete. I wasn't really listening to what you're saying. So these are all books, yeah?
Yeah.
Yep. Right. Cool. Yeah, that would be pretty spectacular. Actually, the picture looks really, really cool. All right. The vial has said 66. Marcus said 2,000. Angie's at 500. Kelvin's at 1,000. Gavin's at 222. Colin said $1 million. Greg King, $2 each at the garage sale. Oh, dude, kicking while he's down. So I don't know what that would equate to for the whole lot. But you're good at maths. What would it be? Do you reckon his bid be? Do you think?
I think there's about 70 of them there, so it's like a third of a cent each.
Oh, okay. No. Okay, so you're saying $2 for the whole lot? Okay.
Oh, okay. $2 each at $140 or $140.
All right, there you go. William has said $950. I'll tell you what, I'll laugh if he gets it. Thomas has said $700. Christy said $15. You can tell she's not a Doctor Who fan. Very good. Bob has said $2,500. And I agree with Russell. I'm still shell shocked at the other books that what they went for. So there you go. Unbelievable. So How about that? Greg King, the Doctor Who dude, $2 a pop, $140 for the lot. Unbelievable. All right, so Doctor Who complete history, complete collection, sealed. Oh, mate, that's just got winner, chicken dinner all over it. So there you go. What do you reckon it went for? It went for a whopping $2,600. How good's that? And Bob, look at Bob's right on the money. He's just saying short by $100.
That's pretty good. So yeah, it's one of those things. I didn't buy these when they came out, and I've picked them up in dribs and drabs all over the place. And the best one I've done, I picked up about 50 in one auction for 99 cents. So it's really all over the place with the price of these. But if you wanted a mint set, I guess that's the way to get them.
Yeah, if you do, you probably do the maths. You probably will find that the value overall is worth it. I mean, even as a non-Doctor Who fan, I can appreciate something that is really, really good quality, and having them brand new like that is really, really impressive. And yeah, there you go. William has said not worth that much, so he tends to think it was overpriced. But yeah, anyway, it is what it is. And Russell asked, how many books were there? Do you know off the top of your head?
I think there was about 77. I'm not 100% sure because they kept doing that thing where they're like, now we've finished the era, we're going to do more to complete the next era, you know, to make sure all the collectors kept going with their sets.
Yeah, fair enough too. I guess once again, it's one, if you're buying it as an investment, it's probably worth it. If you're just buying them to read and throw around and feed to the dog, probably not worth it. So there you go. Yeah. Good stuff. Pay for them originally. Yeah, well, we don't know how much they were paid for originally, but you never know. Well, one thing's for sure, given enough time, they may end up being back on eBay again and selling for a shitload more and add an extra zero on top of that. $2,600. All good stuff. Greg has said 90 of them all up. Anyway, it is what it is. So from the books, if the books aren't your thing and you just like hearing some music, it's time for this.
So here's another interesting one, and this was from that same collection. I don't know anyone here who's watching it. I know there was probably a couple that might have even bid on it. I thought this was the rarest thing in the whole collection that went up, and it was a hard one to recognize, but it's actually a rare New Zealand issue of this album, and a lot of people wouldn't have picked this up because it's got UK on it. But if you know what you're looking at, it's the UK edition, in New Zealand edition, which I have only ever seen for sale about twice ever. So quite a rare pressing for anyone who collects vinyl. So this is a Doctor Who theme by Eric Winston and his orchestra. So, you know, he's one of those guys that gets his orchestra and does popular themes and does covers of them. This is the Doctor Who theme.
And you can say it's choice. So there you go. It's really good to listen to this while you're eating fish and chops. All right, very good. Andrew said 17. Kelvin has said 150. Christy has said 92. Jonathan, good to see Jonathan joining the show. First time I'd ever seen this release. I got to admit, yeah, when you first look at it, it doesn't really say much, but very, very red and particularly groovy looking. Thomas has said 95, which is kind of cool. Eric Winston and his orchestra. 95. Hang on, sorry. Bob has said 160. Colin has ramped it right up to $2,000. Look at it. I mean, far out and is used as if you couldn't tell. Marcus said 330 New Zealand sheep. Good on you. Gavin has said, yeah, the Time Lord, $65, violating the New Zealanders, as the vile should, is the vile at 200. And William has said $100. Unbelievable. So there you go. Yes, particularly groovy. Rare, just says Doctor Who, Eric Winston. What do you reckon this would be worth? This is kind of the kind of thing that most people watching this would have no idea. They go, okay, different. And if it's New Zealand pressing, is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? Does it make it worth more or less? So, but there were 12 bids on this. So there you go. Rusky Babes has chucked in the $2, so he doesn't think it's worth much chop at all. And funnily enough, in New Zealand dollars, it would be relatively cheap. All right. So what do we reckon it went for? Eric Winston Orchestra, Doctor Who UK, 1964. Holy guacamole. From New Zealand. How much do you reckon it's worth? It went for a whopping $415. Holy guacamole.
Yeah, so this was one I was watching because it is one that never ever turns up, and I was thinking I'll bid on this at the last minute and maybe get it, but it was already double what I was prepared to bid before the auction ended, so that wasn't going to happen.
I think Mark got this again. He's short by just around 100 New Zealand sheep, but there you go. But you sit and think about it. That's a lot for a 7-inch. Busted up.
You know, in New Zealand they don't shear their sheep. They don't shear their sheep with anyone.
You're a freaking idiot. Yes. I got bad dags in New Zealand. Yes, where the men are men and the sheep are nervous. Exactly right. All right, let's go on. Let's go. Bad. I'm trying to get an audience here, not let you turn them all away. So there you go. Rusky Babes is completely shit. He's talking about
The crazy thing
the
about that
quoting
is
and the guesses.
Russell is a bit of a Doctor Who fan.
Done dirt sheep. Oh God. Anyway, and you are right, yeah, with the exchange rate and all the rest of it. So anyway, look, it was well done. So yes, very, very good. All right, last item, kids. Oh, Docky Who and the Daleks.
Amazing. This is the cover of the Doctor Who and the Daleks I remember repeatedly hiring from the video library when I was growing up. What's interesting about this, it's got those magic words, Betamax tape, which means there were hardly any of them around when videos were out, and there's even less of them around now. Now, we've seen some of these beta tapes go for a lot of money, and some of them go for absolutely nothing. Do you think this is going to be a $2 Greg King's garage sale item, or Aaron can't buy it because it's too expensive item?
Yeah, at face value, you reckon this would be just chucked out the car window, because clearly there's no one's got machines to play this anymore and all the rest of it, and millions of people would have this on DVD and all these other streaming services and whatever. So it's more not to watch it; it's purely just to say, yes, I've got it in my collection, and we'll see what it's worth. And I can't say how many bids there were on. Andrew said 16. Marcus said 450. Gavin has said 7,000. Holy guacamole! It's a beta video, dude. Jonathan said 110. Colin has said 5. Thomas is 175. Christie's at $1. Holy guacamole! Rusky's gone between $2 and $2 million. Williams at 1,200. Violating the Daleks as one should. Remember, they are car-led travel machines for the car-led mutants. He's at 150. Bob has said 360. So there you go. And Kelvin has said $50. So there you go. A beta video, Doctor Who and the Daleks. Is that the first Peter Cushing movie from '63?
It is the first one. I think it's from '66 though.
Oh, it's the second one. Yeah, okay. Yep, gotcha. So there you go. How rare would this be? I mean, the tape is probably completely destroyed, and Betamax and all the rest of it. So very rare. Oh yeah, thank you very much. So yeah, I would have to concede that is very rare. Most of these would have ended up in landfill decades ago. So there you go. Oh, Greg, $2 in the garage. So you're supposed to be a Docky Who fan. What's the deal, Greg? You're killing us, mate. So unbelievable. So there you go. All right, I've got to admit the cover looks very pretty though. So very, very cool. All right, so Doctor Who and the Day of the it's Day of the Daleks. Hang on, they've got the name wrong. They've said the Day of the Daleks,
but it's wrong. It is Doctor Who and the Daleks.
So we've got the bloody thing wrong. So there you go. All right, so what do you reckon this went for, kids? It went for a whopping $600.
So here's me feeling pretty dumb because I threw out all my beta tapes 20 years ago when you couldn't watch them anymore.
No one is even remotely close to this. Bob, hang on. It's going to take me a few minutes to figure this one out. Shit, hang on. I've just lost where I was. Mark is at 450, so he's probably the closest. He's $150 short though. That's probably about it. Mark, you're batting really well tonight, old son. You're getting shitloads of them. So
Mark's all over the internet as well, so he's pretty good on his prices with Doctor Who stuff.
Yeah, I'll tell you who's crap though. That's Greg at that's for $2. How about that for the beta video, $600? That's still a lot to justify to somebody. If you go to your other half, your significant other, and say, yeah, show them this really dodgy looking, because the condition, if I show you, is listed as acceptable. You show that to your significant other and said, hey, I paid $600 for this. She's going to smack you over the head with it, especially when you can't play it.
But you can't even play it because you don't have a beta player. And I go, exactly. So it's going to stay in this condition. Yeah,
there you go. Exactly right. Very good stuff. So that's our eBay thingy for tonight, which, of course, then leads us directly into our feature presentation. And we're going to be discussing something particularly cool tonight. So what are we discussing tonight, Mr. Aaron?
This dude.
This dude.
Yes. So tonight we're going to be continuing our journey through the decades and looking at Doctor Who collectibles. We've done the 60s and the 70s, and we finally made it into the 80s. And the fantastic thing about the 80s is probably about 1980 is when I became a Doctor Who fan, and that's when I hit the point where I knew I wanted to watch every episode, didn't want to miss it, wanted to collect it, and loved the show. And it's interesting because I was talking to Dags, and Dags has said he'll probably sit this one out while I do most of the talking, and he was saying during the 80s he had better things to do and more sort of other fandoms that he followed. Did you? I'm just interested because everyone I knew who was into sci-fi, even if they didn't really like Doctor Who, watched it because there was just the news on the other stations. We only had 4 stations back then, and the goodies and Doctor Who. Did you watch it at all, or just not your thing?
No, I think what happened in my case is that when you only have one TV in the house and the news is on, and because you got to watch like multiple episodes to get a full story, I think subconsciously, even back then, I thought, well, if I can't see the whole story and all 5 episodes, 6 episodes, 7 episodes, it's not worth watching. And then, of course, I just tuned out and did other things. So it wasn't because I was against the show or disinterested.
No,
It's just the opportunity didn't present itself. But as it turned out, I'd watched more of the Tom Baker stuff in the 70s than I did of anything in the 80s. I didn't see anything at all, zero, from the 1980s. So I know less about Doctor Who of the 80s, except I know who the Doctors were. But that's it, nothing else. So
it's interesting because you would probably know more about fandom in the 80s then, because I remember you from the 80s going to Doctor Who fan club meetings, and indeed I've got that video from the 80s of a Doctor Who club meeting, and lo and behold, I'm showing it, and Dags goes, "Oh, I'm there, I'm in it." so
yeah, well, that's because I was hanging out with people who knew it. Like Rusky Babes is with us tonight, good old Russell, and he was hard. He was right into the Doctor Who club at the time, and Jeff Rowe, of course, became the president of the Doctor Who club later on in the 90s. And so, if anything, I sort of was connected to the club because of these guys, but I wasn't really sort of directly involved because for me, I don't mind being a part of any fan community. I don't necessarily have to be a super fan of the actual topic itself. So even like I was going to Doctor Who club meetings as of only a couple of years ago, before the pandemic, obviously about 3 or 4 years ago. So all because of the people, not because of the subject matter. So that's the reason why I was sort of floating around, as it were.
I think that's one of the great things about fan clubs. There wasn't a lot of fan club hopping. Usually, you know, if you're into one thing or the other, you're stuck with the Star Trek or Doctor Who or Star Wars. But you could go to any fan club, and if you liked the show, you could talk to anyone there because they were into the same thing as you.
Or as Rusky Babes would say, I went there to pick up the hot chair. Yeah.
I think it's interesting that he put chicks plural.
Yeah, well, yeah. I'm not saying anything, so there you go. You are right, William. I just sort of hang around. I was just being a bit of a bad smell, and I did like setting my fingers in various pies, but I didn't associate. I didn't watch the show. That was the thing. So when the conversations came up about the series, I just tuned out because I had nothing to say. So, but that's okay. That's what it's all about, old son. Very good. Yeah. So with that in mind, I'm just going to cut you off. For those in mind, I'm going to bail out, and I'm going to let Aaron run the show for the rest from here on out. And away we go.
Okay, so we're looking at 80s Doctor Who, and I guess, as I just said, I became a fan of Doctor Who in the 80s, and it was one of those things where I'd always been aware of the show, and it had been a little bit too scary for me growing up, but it was during the 80s, and I remember playground discussions on cliffhangers and what was going to happen in the next episode that really got me interested in Doctor Who. And there's 2 events that probably cemented me as a fan and equally mentally scarred me because of what was happening. So this is the announcement that Tom Baker quit. Now, I can just about remember this. I remember my mum being sort of very interested that the Tristram from All Creatures Great and Small was going to be the next Doctor, and they didn't see how he could play it, and it was going to be very different. And this was a big announcement because Tom Baker was the Doctor for 7 years. And for a whole generation of kids, he was the Doctor, particularly in the UK, where they didn't sort of do repeats like we had in Australia. Growing up in Australia, we saw, I guess, Patrick Troughton right through to Tom Baker over and over in repeats all through the Tom Baker era. But in England, they didn't show repeats at all out of Doctor, so they were a bit worried that kids might not even realise the Doctor could regenerate and that there were other Doctors. So in the UK, they did the 5 Faces of Doctor Who season, where they did repeats of some of the old episodes for the first time ever. Now, as you can see, it was a big deal, and Tom Baker went and did what he does and threw a spanner in the works and wished whatever actor or actress followed him luck, which of course then meant no one cared about that the Doctor was regenerating. It was like, is the next Doctor a woman. And as we know, it took another 30 years for that to actually happen. But every time the Doctor regenerated because of Tom Baker's quip, there was always like, is the Doctor going to regenerate into a woman? So these are the some of the very earliest appearances of Peter Davison. And for people who collect newspaper cuttings and scrapbooks, this is the type of thing you can look out for. We will be looking at cuttings a little bit later, though. I'm just going to quickly go through the childhood trauma that I had, which was Peter Davison, soon after he was cast as the Doctor, did a tour of Australia and went to Maya. And I had an aunt who worked in Maya, and they knew I was a Doctor Who fan and told my parents. And my parents said to me, do you know, Peter Davison, the new Doctor, is doing a signing at Maya in a few weeks' time. Are you interested? And well, of course I'm interested. And they said, well, if you're really good, we'll take you. And I was really, really good. And I remember trying to be extra good for weeks and weeks and weeks. And then I said to my parents, well, when's that actually happening? And they looked at me and laughed and said, oh, it actually turned out to be on a school day. Do you really think we were going to take you out of school to see Doctor Who? Now, that's the kind of thing, if they had just taken me and seen it, I might have got it out of my system. But instead, something inside me snapped. And I became a more obsessed Doctor Who fan because of that. Now, if we go back to the slide, Dags, the Doctor took over with the companions that were already travelling with the Fourth Doctor. You have Adric and Tegan and Nyssa. And the Doctor, Peter Davison, stayed for 3 years. He was one of the shorter running Doctors. And through his time as the Doctor, he had he had Turlough as well, who was working for the Black Guardian initially, and Perry right at the end of his reign. And the companion that's often forgot is Chameleon, the robot that basically joined him in one episode, disappeared in the TARDIS, and then came back the next season to be written out because he was too hard to act with and too hard to operate. And during the Doctor's time, we had a new master, the Abankans. We had the Pteroleptals, the Mara, the Cybermen, Khalad, who was also the master, Omega and his Ergon, the giant robot zombie-looking chicken, the Garm, the Black Guardian, the Sea Devils and the Silurians, Davros and Dirty Den from EastEnders, the Malice, the Tractators, and Sharaz Jek. So he had quite a good pantheon of villains. Maybe not as many original villains as some of the other Doctors have had, though. So he was generally well received, and the ratings went up when he took over. And Doctor Who moved from its traditional Saturday evening time slot to weekdays in the UK twice a week for the first time ever, which probably added to the boosted ratings. So as we start looking at the merchandise, the annuals were a mainstay. We've looked at the annuals before, and by the time we got to the annuals, I think the heyday of the annuals had kind of passed. The first Peter Davison annual is interesting in that he's lumped in with Tom Baker's last annual, and Tom Baker sort of was probably still more recognisable and popular as the Doctor, so they probably thought it was a good way to do the changeover. And if you look at the first annual, down the bottom is the first 2 pages of it, and you can see that the artist has been given basically the same publicity shots as the cover of the annual. So you've got Peter Davison and Tom Baker from the front of the annual as the art on the fly page, and then you can see on the right of the screen the Doctor Who special, which has the same art of Peter Davison again. And again, they sold that right at the beginning of the 80s when he'd just announced but wasn't really in the show yet. So all they had was a couple of publicity photos. The 2 middle annuals are interesting. The one in the middle there is probably one of the harder Doctor Who annuals to find, because after Tom Baker, the annuals took a nosedive in sales. So it was quite hard to find that one, and it was very hard in Australia to get that annual. The next year, though, when you had the 5 Doctors and it was a bit of a celebration for the 20th anniversary, the 1984 annual was absolutely everywhere, and it was probably the easiest annual to find in Australia in op shops and secondhand bookshops, just because we kind of had a lack of the previous 2 and then was absolutely flooded with this one right in the publicity for the 5 Doctors and the show's 20th anniversary. Now, of course, anyone who's watched this show, we have done charted the target books, and eventually we will do a show just on the target books. We've kind of just looked at the books from each year and haven't really gone into them in depth. And another one of those stories where, as a collector, I'm sure everyone understands this, you like to get some of the promo items. And what I've got here is the dump bin headers for target books. So when you went into your bookshop, these were stuck in the top of the racks, the cardboard racks that kind of were portable and had, you know, like the books displayed in them. And I used to go into my local Collins bookshop in Eastlands, and the one on the top left there was the first, I think, one that came out for the target books. And it turned up in the shop, and I said to them, I need this. And they're like, well, we need it too to sell the books. And I kept going in week after week, and they said, okay, we'll save it for you. When we're not using it anymore, we will give it to you. And it took, I think, about 6 weeks of me going in, going and asking. It felt like 6 months because I was only about 9 years old at the time. And then I went in one day and it was no longer on display. And I said to them, so you saved it for me? And they said, oh, no, we threw it out. And it took me about 30 years to track another one down on eBay. So that's another one of those things that's quite scarring as a kid. So they used the art on that one from the Doctor Who program guides, which I've got pictured there as well. And over the 80s, they updated their dump bin header every season or every year to kind of update the look of the books. Have I got any screen used props? Yes, I have, but probably too hard to go into at the moment. So here's some more of the target advertising. And this is interesting because these posters were given away for free as promo, and you could also send off for WH Allen and buy them, but they were quite cheap. It was basically the price of postage. And I recently found the tube that I had sent away from in the 80s, and when I had got them, I had kind of opened them to make sure they were all there and then put them back in the tube, and they'd sat in the tube in the garage for about 40 years. I've probably had them out once or twice just to make sure they haven't been eaten by bugs or anything like that. But so I've got the original set of them, and they were covers from Target books, and they were quite stunning posters that made great displays. And the one with the Dalek with all the Target books behind it was one I had in my bedroom for about 20 years, and I still have that that poster, which is a bit moth-eaten now, sitting in a folder underneath my bed. So one of the things that I had up on my wall as a child, and I've still got it in the bedroom here. And here are the general Target books and some of the advertising for them. Now, a major change happened when Peter Davison took over as the Doctor, and there was a bit of a shake-up with design. Now, up until this point, they had always used an artist and paintings and amazing imagery to sort of sell the books. There was some issue with Peter Davison. His first book, which was Visitation, they saw the artwork, and Peter Davison or his agent had issue with it, and they couldn't use it. So rather than recommission different art, they decided to go with photographic covers. So I remember being very disappointed because one of the best things about the Doctor Who books was the art on the cover was amazing and had all this great imagery. And then when Peter Davison became the Doctor, it was usually a really bad sort of cut and paste job of a publicity photo of him stuck on front of a image from the actual episode. And you can see there, that's the first 2 years of Peter Davison's stories, and the couple of books that didn't get novelised straight away and then were novelised to fill in gaps a couple of years later, they had gone back to artwork at that time. So you can see in the top row there's 6 books, and then one of them has artwork, and then below that there's 6 books, and then 2 of them have artwork, and that's because they were released a bit later. Except for the 5 Doctors, which is actually the first Doctor Who book that was released before the show was actually broadcast. So that came out for the 20th anniversary, and it was a bit special. It was printed in metallic silver cover for the anniversary story. My favourite Doctor, that's probably Patrick Troughton and Tom Baker and Peter Capaldi. It's really hard to split, but I'm one of those people, I guess people grew up, if I was to say which Doctor did I grow up with and was my Doctor, it would probably be Peter Davison, because he was the one who was being broadcast as I was going through late primary school. But in Australia, just because we had the repeats all over the place, I used to think it was funny that people would go, this is my era or this is my era, because we kind of had the whole thing mixed up. So I kind of loved whatever Doctor was on at the time. I'm one of those fans that's pretty lucky. I've kind of liked all the Doctors and found something to love in just about every era of the show. Yeah, they have. The TARDIS does change because the prop breaks sometimes and they have to replace it. And they've made jokes in the show about the size of the windows changing. There have been a couple of times where the Doctor has repaired the chameleon circuit. So in Attack of the Cybermen, it appears as, I think, 6 different versions of the TARDIS, from piano organs to ornate furniture and gates and things like that. But eventually the TARDIS goes back to being the police box. They didn't like doing artwork of Davidson. They thought his face was too bland. That is absolutely true. And it happened in the comics as well, because when you have more character, and I guess that means lines or blemishes on your face, even though you don't realize it, it's almost a caricature and they can latch onto that. But Peter Davison was handsome and pretty, open-faced and normal looking. So it was very hard for the artist to find anything to identify with him. And this is the last year of the Peter Davison Target book releases. And there's the Target book poster that I was talking about on the left. That was the advert that you could send away for and have in your room. And by then you can see they've gone into artwork again, with Andrew Skilleter kind of being the house artist for quite a while there. Now, interestingly, the book on the far right, Resurrection of the Daleks, Target completed all of their novelizations by about 95. I think the last one came out and they were filling the gaps. And there was about 3 or 4 books that they couldn't get the rights to do because there were issues with the author or there were issues with copyright. So there was the Douglas Adams ones and there was 2 of the Dalek ones. And this is one of the Dalek ones, and it only came out last year. So all of the Target books were completed about 20, 30 years ago. And then in the last year or two, the BBC has managed to go back and fill in the gaps. And what's really interesting, Target books got absorbed by other companies and it went to Virgin Books and then Penguin. And eventually it just happened that the BBC owned all of these, so they could resurrect Target books after 30 years and use the same style and the same logos and complete the last couple of books for the Target range. Now, that is a long time between drinks for collectors if you're trying to fill the gaps in your collection. Now, there weren't only the Target books coming out at the time. I think they did some stuff that kind of, was a bit capitalized on the popularity of Peter Davison, but really shortchanged the fans for what they are. So you would get these other books coming out, which on the right you have the quiz books, which are the quiz books of science and the quiz book of dinosaurs and magic and space. What's interesting about those, I don't know if everyone remembers, you used to have a book club at school, and like once a month you'd get a newsletter and it'd have the books you could order. And there was never a book in that book club that I ever wanted. And then book club rocked up and the cover of it was Doctor Who and the quiz book of dinosaurs. So I thought that was the best thing ever. And it was the first time I ever ran home and said to my mum, I need to get stuff from the book club this month. The other interesting set of books there is the Peter Davison Book of Alien Planets and the Peter Davison Book of Alien Monsters, which are singularly sort of unimpressive in any way, except for Peter Davison was given about 10 stories and they said pick 5 that sound good and we'll put them in this book. So even though they were the Peter Davison book, he pretty much had nothing to do with them. And then Forbidden Planet goes and has a signing where he's signing these books that he had nothing to do with. As an aside, one of my friends growing up said he was never going to buy those books, but he wanted them. So he did a I guess, grab and run out of Target to get one of the Peter Davison books of Alien Planets, and the Target security clotheslined him and took him down and took him into the back room and was going to call the police, and it was a big drama, and he was like so embarrassed after. He was like, oh, I nearly got taken to the police over the Peter Davison Book of Alien Planets, which is an interesting little aside. Yes, well, that was the thing. I missed out on that because he did appear in costume in Maya Lonsdale Street in, I think it was 82. And apparently a couple of fans went, but he was kind of, it wasn't really advertised, and before the internet it didn't go around as much, so there was a couple of people there wondering why sort of Tristan from All Creatures Great and Small was dressed in a cricket uniform and doing a signing at Myer. You can get online and you can find photos of fans that went and met him, and years later he actually did a signing at Chadstone ABC shop, which I managed to get to go to, and I said to him, you know, I tried to see you last time but my parents wouldn't let me. I'm sure Peter Davidson really cared about that story. And so here's some of the other interesting stuff that W.H. Allen and Target were putting out. So by this time, fandom was taking off and Doctor Who was becoming a bit of an institution. And it was getting beyond just sort of comics and magazines, and they realized that you could get high-end items. So throughout the 80s, the specialty books that W.H. Allen were bringing out, they did leather-bound editions. So the leather-bound editions are, of course, quite nice and hard to find in slipcases, and that's the 3 leather bounds, which is the Doctor Who A Celebration and the Key to Time in the early years. Now, underneath that is the Doctor Who gift sets, and this was another one of those things where I used to cheat a bit. The Doctor Who gift sets were 4 book packs that you could buy, and they were in cellophane, and they had 4 set books in each one. So every gift set would have the same 4 books for the first Doctor Who gift set, the second Doctor Who gift set, but they were cheaper. You got 4 books for the price of 3. So I used to be in the bookshop as like a 10-year-old, stretching the cellophane and filling up with 4 books that I needed from my collection, so I could go and buy the Doctor Who gift set, and it would have 4 books for the price of 3, but all 4 books I would need. So I don't know if that's breaking the law, but it's bending it a little, I'm sure. And at one time I was buying all the gift packs where I could find them and pulling all the books out and selling the books separately at the Doctor Who Club. So at one stage I had hundreds of just the empty slipcases for the Doctor Who gift sets. And here's one of the coolest books ever. It's the Doctor Who pattern book, because do you know what? Every nana needs the Doctor Who pattern book to knit Doctor Who clothing for their grandchildren. And so the Doctor Who pattern book was filled with patterns for Doctor Who monsters and Doctor Who knitted dolls and Doctor Who costumes, which is the early version of cosplay. But the coolest things, of course, was your knitted Doctor Who pullover. And that isn't me, but I guess I'm sad to say that I asked for that pullover, but I wanted it in green instead of blue, which I quickly got knitted, and I used to wear that to school thinking I was the coolest person ever. And I tell you what, the guy down the bottom who's modeling the Doctor Who jumper with the stick of celery, which there is also a pattern in the book to make, doesn't he look like the happiest person ever, who's absolutely amazed that he's been hired to model Doctor Who jumpers? So another one of the more popular books that came out at this time was the Doctor Who Technical Manual. Now, I used to have an issue with the ABC shop because they'd sell Doctor Who stuff, but they wouldn't sell just the Doctor Who fiction, because they said to me it was too much like pulp fiction and it was a bit below them. So it had to be a specialty book that was factual rather than the Doctor Who episodes, which I always thought was really, very hypocritical, because you would get them showing the show and selling stuff from the show, but then they wouldn't actually sell the books because they were too lowbrow. But anyway, the Doctor Who Technical Manual was one of the biggest selling books of the 80s. And I think it is one of those books that if you knew a Doctor Who fan, everyone thought it was the perfect gift. And there is an Australian ABC edition of that. So it's a bit hard to see. The one at the top is the regular edition, and the one at the bottom is the ABC one with the ABC logo on. And that's why it's easy to get in Australia. And there was a hardback and a paperback edition of that. You can see it's one of those, blueprint books that just has the Doctor Who monsters and guns and props and the sonic screwdriver. And it basically has the blueprint schematics of it and a little description for all of them. The cardboard cutout Dalek there was part of the advertising, and I have a couple of those in different sizes. And it was one of those books that I actually took into school because we had a woodwork project of making a plaque using just different shapes, and I used the Cyber logo in the middle there, and my woodwork teacher thought it was fantastic. So one of the things I always used to do was try and involve Doctor Who to any free product that we ever got to do in any art class. So my teachers got pretty sick of that after a while. Did you ever update the book, update this book to modernize it? They never have. There have been recently sort of those fabulous cross-section books, which would probably be the closest that they've got to doing blueprints. So they probably are better than the technical manual because they have more pictures and they're a lot thicker and they have a lot more detail in them. The technical manual was notorious for being a bit dodgy. The sonic screwdriver in there, if you made it to the specifications, they said it's about a third too big. So obviously someone wasn't doing their maths. It is one that you can still pick up pretty regularly in book exchanges, and I think I've got them in the shop too because they turn up quite a bit. And the Doctor Who magazine took off in the 80s. Now, when we were looking at the beginning of Doctor Who magazine at the end of the 70s, we saw that Tom Baker laid a lot of groundwork to make the launch a success, where they even moved 1 million copies of the first couple of issues when it originally came out. And by the time Davidson had taken over, the sales had dropped off, but what they were selling was regular, and it was a success. And Doctor Who magazine and weekly started off as really a kid's book that was just a magazine, maybe just a step above a comic book. But by the time Peter Davison came along, they realized that the market was much wider and they were getting more adults by it as well as kids. So you would actually start to see some more in-depth articles about Doctor Who and the production of the show and news on the show and what was coming out than you would the comic books, which they kind of dropped back. Also, John Nathan Turner, who was the producer of the show throughout the whole 80s, started using Doctor Who magazine as a mouthpiece and to publicise the show, which was a good thing because there would be a lot of new photos and a lot of new news. Now, back in the day before the internet, Doctor Who magazine probably was the best source of news for Doctor Who. It came out, monthly. Fanzines were around and they would come out, but a lot of the stuff in fanzines was speculation and it wasn't actually confirmed till you saw it in print in Doctor Who magazine. So they went from Doctor Who magazine to the official Doctor Who magazine, which really cemented their place in we've got the official news and everyone else has kind of got the scraps of rumour that's flying around. So those ones are the very first ones with Peter Davison, and you can see for the first year he had the cover just about to himself. Why did the Doctor? Well, when they were doing the costume for Peter Davison, they originally had him dressed in sort of a private school blazer, and it was kind of the same costume, but they wanted it to be something even a bit more British. And it was Peter Davison himself who suggested, well, it kind of looks like a cricketing jacket from Victorian times. And they said, yes, we'll go with that, because obviously the Doctor being British, it's sort of that eccentric game that Americans will identify. And he kind of regrets saying that because he kind of wanted to wear a normal clothes, not a uniform. And by the time Peter Davison came along, the Doctor didn't wear normal clothes anymore. It was kind of a uniform and he wore the same clothes in every single episode. And so here we are with some of the later issues of Doctor Who magazine during the Peter Davison time as the Doctor, and you would get glossier paper and you'd get more pages and more colour, which is one of those things that indicates that the magazine is a success. And that was one of the things back in the day that fanzines couldn't really compete with. Very hard running a fanzine with colour and more pages when you're doing it yourself and don't have access to printers. So Doctor Who magazine stood alone and sort of unparalleled at the time, and it was quite a good read. I remember I would get it because I was the only person I kind of knew who got it, and then most of my friends would read it as well because it was still at the stage where a lot of people who weren't fans were still interested in what was happening with Doctor Who. And I remember getting these covers and you'd see the Master is back again, because we'd get the shows a year after they were on the ABC. And, it was really great every month getting it and not knowing well, having the first news was in that magazine rather than like we do now. Someone sees it and 2 minutes later it comes up on your Facebook feed. It was a different time back then to be a collector. It did. It actually did. His Cricket Choice help membership. It did. Ian Botham became a fan of the show. He had apparently always been a fan, but because the Doctor became sort of a symbol for England and cricket, Ian Botham then would do charity matches and invited Peter Davison to play cricket. And there was one episode where cricket was part of the story, a couple of episodes actually, where the cricket ball and things like that. So Peter Davison suddenly found him and Anthony Ainley, who played the Master and really liked cricket as well, were doing charity matches and opening fates and doing cricket matches and things like that. And he was invited to the British team because Ian Botham was a Doctor Who fan. And I think Ian Botham actually appears on a couple of extras for Doctor Who DVD and talks about that. Did you have many friends at school who liked Doctor Who as much as yourself? Yes, it's really interesting. I would never say Doctor Who was cool, but all through primary school, just about everyone in my group of friends watched Doctor Who. So there'd be about 8 or 9 of us that the next day after an episode aired, we would all gather around and talk about what was going to happen next in the episode and what had just happened. And I do remember specifically talking about different cliffhangers and being blown away. The one in particular is from Android Invasion, where Sarah rolls over and her face falls off because she was a replicant android, and all of us going, oh my goodness. What I found interesting, I grew up and everyone grew up and we still love Doctor Who. And towards the end of the 80s, when we went to high school, there was the hiatus where Doctor Who wasn't produced for 18 months. And when it came back on a Saturday here, and I watched it and none of my friends realized it was on. So they kind of lost that. And then when it went back to weeknights, it was Sylvester McCoy a year after that. And all of my friends who watched it and still liked the old Doctor Who watched it and go, oh, this is terrible. It's just for kids. So sort of, even though it was a couple of years, sort of within one episode, everyone who used to watch it stopped except for me. Now, one of the biggest deals in the 80s, and like this is still one of my favorite events in Doctor Who, was the 20th anniversary where they did the 5 Doctors special. Now, the anniversaries of Doctor Who are generally marked with a story where a couple of the Doctors come back. And we've had that recently in the new series, and 10 years before this, they had the 3 Doctors. But for the 20th anniversary, there was the 5 Doctors. And the 5 Doctors generated a lot of publicity and a lot of merchandise. It was the 20th anniversary. It was a big deal. Doctor Who had become a beloved institution in England. They held massive conventions in England and America that were sold out and basically had thousands of fans turn up on both sides of the Atlantic. English fans complained because the American fan club got bigger so they could afford all the guests. So on the anniversary weekend, half the guests were over in America, half the actors. So the English conventions weren't as big. But the merchandise released with this is generally a celebration of the show's 20 years. And this is probably one of my favorite items of merchandise from the 80s, and that's the Doctor Who magazine Radio Times 20th anniversary special. And it was so popular that there were different versions. Now, the one at the top there is the English Radio Times version, and below that, there's 2 Starlog versions. So there's the anniversary American version, and it was so popular, it sold out. And a year later, they just re-released it, not as an anniversary special, just as a Doctor Who special. So it really shows you how big the show was in America at the time. And then there's the Australian version, which again shows you how popular it was, because usually you wouldn't get an Australian pressing of a magazine like that. They would just import them. And I remember seeing this leading up to Christmas in 1983 and saying, I need to buy this. And my parents going, no, you buy stuff all the time. You can't have this. And I just about had a fit in the shop saying, I'm not missing out on this magazine. And my parents having to say, well, congratulations, we've bought this for you for Christmas, but because you're making such a big deal, now we have to tell you and it's not a surprise anymore. So as a kid, I could be a bit spoiled, I guess, but there you go. I was a dedicated Doctor Who fan at the time. So this is the Radio Times cover for the Five Doctors special. Now, we looked at the Radio Times in the 60s and 70s, and Doctor Who was quite well represented. Until Tom Baker came along, who was probably the most popular Doctor ever, and he didn't get a Radio Times cover for the entire time he was the Doctor. Doctor Who could have had a Radio Times cover before this one in Peter Davidson's previous season for Earthshock, which was the return of the Cybermen, and Radio Times did approach the production office and want photos to do a cover, but because they wanted the Cybermen's return to be a surprise, John Nathan Turner actually said, we don't want it put on the cover of Radio Times. So although they could have had the publicity of being on the cover of Radio Times, the only Radio Times cover in the 80s was this fantastic Andrew Skilleter painted cover for the Five Doctors. So it really does show you how popular at the time that the show was. Now, also, I was saying earlier about fanzines and how they couldn't really compete with Doctor Who magazine. Fanzines had started in the 70s, and there were fan clubs for Doctor Who in the 60s, but it wasn't until the 80s that fanzines really took off. And even in the 80s, I was drawing and writing articles for fanzines. And back then, a fanzine isn't the slick produced fanzine that you might see now, which is all done on computer and has color photos and is all sort of worked out and edited online and then finessed and then printed up, and it almost looks like a professional piece. Back then, fanzines could range from 6-page photocopy, do-it-yourself jobs to semi-professional, articles and sort of digests and things on analysing the show, to fan fiction, to photo magazines, to art magazines. And there really was a niche in fandom for every kind of fanzine. And if you collected, and if we looked at all the different fanzines in Doctor Who, that would be an entire show. Here are some of the ones. Where's Supervoc? Well, no one bought that, Russell. That's why. I actually do have a couple of copies of Supervoc, but I don't know where they are. That was one that I think Russell was involved with. I remember there being a Kraken story in it. But that was the Victorian, the Victorian Club's fanzine, which had a bit of fiction in, and their newsletter was Sonic Screwdriver. But the ones I put up here are mainly the British fanzines that are sort of the ones that are really well more known. The Doctor Who Appreciation Society released TARDIS, and they've released the Celestial Toy Room, which was the newsletter for that. And then you've got Eye of Horus and a lot of other fanzines. Now, what's interesting about the whole fanzine culture is a lot of professional writers actually got their start editing and producing fanzines. And you will see in some of these magazines, they've become quite collectible because they're the earliest works of some professional writers that went on to write on the show and went on to much bigger things. And as well, artists who went on to become professionals in the industry also got their start in fanzines as well. So the whole fanzine subculture is something that we've kind of lost now. There are still fanzines produced, but not in the same way they used to be. I think Dags was telling me, when Jethro used to run the Club of Victoria, they'd get all of the fanzines and they'd cut up the articles and they'd stick them to boards. And that was their version of word processing. You would, literally type it all out, letter set it, stick it to boards, photo. Oh, look who's back. You can set me right on this. That was how fanzines were done back in the day.
Yeah, I mean, people who've been around for a very long time will know this quite well because there was the issue that you're right, there was no technology. It was all done with typewriters and all the rest of it. And in some cases, it probably even handwritten. But it was the content that was really, really popular. And like the Star Trek Club, for example, they even bought a typewriter and a person. It was their job. The editor would have to retype every single story just to keep the font the same. So the love and effort that went into producing fanzines, because you've got to remember the idea of a fanzine, unlike a club newsletter, is it would be sold for a profit by the club. As opposed to a newsletter, you join the club, you get the newsletter for free. But the fanzine would be something they could sell separately. And there were some that were actually sold in some bookshops, like Galaxy, maybe Minotaur, probably in England particularly. So there was definitely an impetus to produce these things at high quality because you'd be selling them for a profit. Of course, the money went back to the fan club. So, but yes, that's how it was back then, and nobody knew any different. So there you go.
Yeah, and it was not just Doctor Who; it was all fandoms.
Yeah,
the same thing. Yeah.
Yep.
So
Totally agree.
fanzines were a big thing and a whole cottage industry to themselves.
Yep.
But here we go. If you collect newspaper cuttings and made scrapbooks based on your favorite show, during the 80s, Doctor Who exploded with content. And these are some of the ones from the collection I used to have. And I say that a bit sadly because in the dawn of the internet, so we're going back, 15, 20 years, so not really the dawn, there was a site called the Doctor Who Cuttings Archive. And I think it's still there, but in a different form now. And basically someone had taken up the job of trying to scan and put up every single Doctor Who article that had ever seen print and put it into an archive so it's accessible to all fandom worldwide on the internet. And they had done a really amazing job on American and English cuttings, and there was basically no Australian cuttings at all. And so quite selflessly, I contacted them and said, I have an absolutely amazing collection of newspaper cuttings. I am happy to donate them to you for free as long as you guarantee they are all scanned and put up and made available to everyone. To which they were like, absolutely, that's absolutely fine. We would love that. We don't really have a lot of Australian stuff. So I sent them off. And during the time I sent them off, News of the World and a couple of other English newspapers sued them and sent them cease and desists and basically said, if you continue doing this in any way, we will bankrupt you and you will lose everything. And so I sent all this stuff over, and about 2 weeks later, the site, the site went dead. The emails got bounced back and I could never contact them ever again. So I had an amazing collection of cuttings, which was probably more than hundreds, probably thousands of Australian cuttings that went right back to the 60s. Don't know what happened to them, never ended up being anywhere. And they are a collection that I think would be pretty irreplaceable. So I had people in all the different states and New Zealand getting cuttings for me and sending them across. And it is one of those things where now I have my own page. I wish I'd just kept them and I could have scanned them and put them up on my own page, which is the Braxiatel collection that talks about Doctor Who merchandise. But there were cuttings there that I have never seen anywhere else ever again. So that's a bit sad. But you do find scrapbooks and you do find cuttings go up online. There's a lot for the new series, but for the classic Doctor Who, in the 60s and 70s, there were some cuttings, but by the 80s, there was a lot of Doctor Who articles on all different aspects of the show. What is interesting when you read cuttings from this time is the perspective on episodes and the perspective on the show is totally different at the time from what people think about it in retrospect. And I think it's on the next slide. And this is how many cuttings I had. You can see there is all those cuttings that are to do with the debut of, I think, series 21, and how Warriors of the Deep and the return of the Silurians and Sea Devils is one of the most classic things to ever happen in Doctor Who. And of course, not long after it was shown, fans decided it's one of the worst series ever. But you can see in the cuttings, it's got the magic of Doctor Who, and Doctor Who still fresh after 21 years, and amazing special effects with pictures of the Silurians and the Sea Devils. And that is totally changed over time, where people think it's probably the worst series of the season. On the left there is one of my friends, Edwin, has some New Zealand Doctor Who cuttings and articles and papers, and that's Junior Listener. Now, Listener was like TV Week in New Zealand, and that would be quite a rare item that he gave me to show on this episode, which I had never actually ever seen before. So if you collect cuttings, it's probably trawling the internet and looking around the world. And as we've seen on the show before, I found some interesting cuttings of monsters even in Holland. So stuff turns up everywhere. But if you're a Doctor Who fan and you collect cuttings, it is a very interesting way to look at the history of the series from a different view rather than the fandom view, which is probably the loudest view online. Now, Marvel, for a while in the 80s, produced Doctor Who comic. Now, Doctor Who comic was basically the comics from the Doctor Who magazine and weekly repackaged as a Marvel comic. The interesting thing, in Doctor Who magazine and weekly, the comics were black and white, but Marvel coloured them all. Now, during this time, I think, particularly through the Davidson run and later the Colin Baker run. The comics were the best they had ever been, so Marvel picked a good time to start doing American adaptations of the Doctor Who comics, and they're interesting to see because they are in colour, so you get like a totally different view, because colour can highlight different panels and highlight different action and add mood and even pace to stories that weren't there in the black and white version. And just for anyone who are collectors, while I was researching this, that comic in the middle, which is graded 9.6, one of the highest grades you can ever get on a comic, that's on eBay at the moment for $45 American. And I nearly bought it because it costs you about $45 to get something graded. So basically you're getting a high grade comic just for the price of the grading. I didn't buy it, but if anyone collects comics, I think that's a bit of a bargain that's online at the moment. The other thing that fans absolutely love to collect is the cast cards and the postcards. Now, we've looked on previous episodes at the cast cards and the beginning of the postcards. Cast cards are like that black and white card I showed earlier, where basically actors through their agents or through the BBC, if they're lucky, will get a promotional card printed out of them and they can be part of the cast of a show. And when people wrote in fan mail, the production office would have like 100 of them pre-signed that they could just send out for return to fan mail and stuff like that. By the 80s though, cast cards, which were the black and white ones, were kind of on the way out, and a company called Larkfield started doing postcards to be given away as promotion for the actors through the BBC. Now, I, on a couple of occasions, wrote off to different actors, and I would sometimes get like a reply from the production office with postcards of different actors back. The one I remember sending off for is Sylvester McCoy, and then getting Sophie Eldred, who was Ace, back about a year later. So you did used to get stuff back, and it was interesting. But now these days with conventions, people will get stuff signed directly. Interestingly, Sarah Sutton, who played Nyssa, there's 2 black and white cast cards on the top left there. She seems to be the last of the actresses I could find on Doctor Who to have cast cards. And that might be because she was a little bit famous before she was in Doctor Who. She was in a show called The Moon Stallion. So she might have already had cast cards because she was already in shows. But the second one there seems to be a later one, and I had never seen that before. So she has the distinction of probably having the later cast card of its time when it came out. The cast of Doctor Who down the bottom there all had various postcards for them. Sometimes they had the same postcard for their entire run on the show. Sometimes they would update them with different seasons, so they had different looks and different costumes. My collection is in the middle there, which is all signed ones that I have picked up over time, which are quite hard to do, and I haven't picked up one I needed for a while. Interestingly, if we go to the next slide, 2 of the hardest postcards to find, and I don't have them, and I'm pretty sure there's probably under 10 of each that are in existence, are the 2 in the top centre there, which is of Sarah Jane Smith, played by Elizabeth Sladen, and of the Doctor's granddaughter Susan, who is Carol Ann Ford. Now, these cards were given away at the Longleat convention, and they debuted at that weekend, and the actresses hadn't seen them. And they were so horrified by these cards, as in they thought it didn't represent them well and it made them look ugly. They basically stole all of the cards and they went and put them in a dump master at Longleat. And as far as anyone knows, no one ever went and got that dump master because hundreds of them haven't turned up. So the only way to have got them would have been on Longleat on the day before the actresses saw them and managed to pick them up and keep them without them getting thrown out. So I've only ever seen a handful of them in 20, 30 years of looking on eBay now, and they always go for many hundreds of pounds because everyone has all of the postcards except for those, so everyone has the same 2 gaps in their collection. There is a couple of variations on the postcards. Down the bottom there, the second Tom Baker had a variant that not a lot of people know, and there's a canine one there. The regular one is at the top, and down the bottom is the original variant that was changed pretty fast, which is a tough one to find as well. So if you collect postcards, they're a fun and interesting collection to get, but you've got to be prepared. Those last couple you're probably never going to be able to add to your collection. Jigsaws are some of my favourite collectibles, and Peter Davison had a series of jigsaws. There were 4 of them, and unfortunately they're one of the worst series of jigsaws, I think. The one of him standing in the publicity shots outside the TARDIS is a really nice shot of him, but they've done the thing in the other jigsaws where they've decided to cut and paste really crudely, cut out the Doctor from one picture, cut out the Master from another picture, cut out the TARDIS that isn't really the prop, and then put the 3 together. You probably can't see them because the screen's a bit small, but it is really crudely done. But you can see in the jigsaw with the Master pointing his gun at the Doctor, it's the same picture as the Doctor sort of recoiling from the Cybermen, and that's just lazy, where they use the same picture on 2 different jigsaws in the same range. And again, Peter Davison at that stage hadn't gone up against the Daleks, so they've just whacked him behind a desk. And if you look at the proportion, he's kind of a bit too miniature to be behind the desk, sort of pointing his gun at a Dalek there. So if you're interested in jigsaws, they do have that sort of 80s charm about them, kind of like the Target books where they've gone for publicity photos and been really lazy. They are still an affordable and easy set of jigsaws to find. And the last ones I found were actually in an op shop in Brisbane. So there you go. They even turn up locally. No, it was just a play on the words K9. And you can see the vial has dropped into this segment just to add a little bit of spice. This is the notorious Doctor Who Easter egg, where whoever the designers were clever enough that the Dalek outside the TARDIS firing his weapon, when you opened the door to see Peter Davison inside the TARDIS, it has the weapon firing out of his crotch. And that's why I had to borrow these pictures from the vial, because he was going to use them on the vial file, but we got to do this before. Now, one of the hardest pieces of merchandise to get is, of course, disposable items. Now, I had the Doctor Who Easter egg and I never ate it. And after a couple of years, it started to smell, and I opened it and the chocolate had turned like this milky white color, and I ended up throwing it out. But the good thing about it, it's just a generic Easter egg that seems to be Easter egg size, that you could replace every couple of years if you needed to. It also came with a book of transfers. So you've got the mini book of Doctor Who villains. And it is one of the hardest sort of bonus things to find. Because it is instantly disposable. Kids would get this at Easter, they'd unfold the book, and then they'd get the transfers and they'd rub them all down onto the book. So instantly everything's used. And then a little tiny book like that, which is, wallet size. Once you've put all the transfers in, you're never going to use it again, so they get thrown out. So you can find the Easter egg box. Very hard to find the little box of the little book of transfers that came with the Easter egg. Now, the other thing that took off in the 80s, and you didn't see much in the 70s, was Doctor Who t-shirts. And you can see on the back of Doctor Who magazine there, you've got like one of the BBC salespeople saying, "This t-shirt is excellent, you should buy it." Now, t-shirts is actually one of those sort of uncategorized, unresearched areas of Doctor Who fandom. I think if Jethro's still watching, he has the smartest way to deal with this. His old fan t-shirts, he would cut the art panel off and he would just keep that. Now, I've kept a lot of the t-shirts. All those ones in the picture there are from my garage. I used to wear them until I didn't fit them anymore, and then I'd fold them up and put them away. Now, if you look on eBay for t-shirts, you find them, but you find the same few over and over again. And if you look online for, a catalogue of t-shirts and what's out there, there really isn't a lot. And the ones you see, I often go, I've never seen those before. And then the ones I've got, some of them are never documented. And what Dags was saying earlier about how fan clubs were usually paid for subscriptions, and the subscriptions would get you the newsletter. Fan clubs would often print t-shirts, and the t-shirts would be a way for them to make some extra cash sometimes by, they get the t-shirts for $6 each. They get it screen printed for $2 a piece, and then they sell them for 10, so make a bit of money. Now, I have a very rare Doctor Who Club of Victoria t-shirt from the early 80s, probably from when I was about 8 or 9 years old. I would wear that one, and you can see that is the real size of the t-shirt next to an adult T-shirt, which is that big Doctor Who one. So it shows you the difference in sizes and how long I had been a fashion victim for Doctor Who. Yes, yeah, the sweat stains as well, especially from those steamy convention video rooms, as Russell's pointed out. And there is a lot of ones like Whovention, because often when a convention was run, they would do a T-shirt to help fund it and help fans remember the convention. And some of those T-shirts, I think, when they are sold at the event for the day, are some of the hardest to find after the event unofficial merchandise that you can get. There were some particularly good artists in Australia that would do fan T-shirts, even for Star Wars and Star Trek. And there were some really good T-shirt shops that would just specialize in sort of geeky T-shirts. The Land Beyond Beyond in Sydney was one I remember getting T-shirts from. But you could go to Caribbean Gardens and sometimes pick up a bootleg Doctor Who T-shirt that you'd wonder, what's that doing here? But you'd grab it anyway. Now, the other thing that started up in the 80s was video games, and not wanting to be behind the crowd, Doctor Who had video games, and it was one of the first franchises, probably the first English franchise to have video games. I think Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, maybe at the same time as Doctor Who, had some video games. Now, this is Doctor Who, The First Adventure, and this came out for the 20th anniversary special, and it was basically a video game in different levels, but it was a good game because the levels all ripped off other single games. So down the bottom left there, you've got the Frogger level. Now, if you grew up and you had Frogger, you would know if you bought Frogger, that was the whole game. But in the Doctor Who game, it had about 6 different levels, and all of them were like, I guess, an appropriated game adapted into a Doctor Who version. So it was quite a good game. But I've only seen reviews of it on YouTube. I've never actually played it because I've only ever had the BBC Acorn version of the tape, and I never had a system that could actually play the game. So Doctor Who was one of those things where it didn't really get general releases on a lot of the more popular gaming platforms until a couple of years later, when you'd see stuff on the Commodore 64 and the Amiga and PC. So Doctor Who had games, but it was on very specific systems. Interestingly enough, the BBC Acorn, which this was on, did the graphics for the displays in the TARDIS at the time. So the Doctor's TARDIS was working on like 1980s BBC Acorn processors. There's a bit of trivia for you. And here are some of the other Doctor Who games from this era. And interestingly enough, they're text adventures. Now, text adventures I really loved. It's one of those things that has kind of gone now, but anyone who grew up with them would know them, where you would get a paragraph of description and then the computer would give you options like, what did you want to do? And you could put like walk left, walk right, use sword, chop tree. And it was very basic and rudimentary, but it really actually wasn't like reading a story, but it drew you in and you were able to make decisions, and the decisions would affect how the game went. So Doctor Who and the Warlords was a text adventure. I never played that one. Next to that's the tape of Doctor Who and the Key to Time. Now, I had a friend who was able to play that one, and I do remember playing that and being very frustrated. Each level was a different Doctor, and I remember fighting the Sensorites on one level and the Sontarans, but it's so long ago I don't remember much about the game at all. And then the last game down the bottom there, Time Lord, has only recently been rediscovered. So it was a game that I didn't even know existed until Doctor Who magazine did an article on Doctor Who gaming and came up with this one that no one remembered. And then there's an ad there in a newspaper for Dalek Dan, which shows like a very odd looking Dalek chasing a guy in a maze, and there is no information at all on what that game is. So there's forgotten games from the 80s that have probably not got any examples left because the media that they're on would have deteriorated by now. Does the first adventure command decent money these days? Depends what you mean by decent money. A really mint complete one, 20, 30 pounds. I have seen them turn up in Australia as well with ABC shop stickers on, though I never remember them being in the ABC shop. So They must have been here though, but I've never really got a lot for one, and I've never really paid a lot for one. I have seen people ask a lot for them, but I don't know if they ever sell for that much. And Doctor Who posters. Now, during the 60s and 70s, there was a smattering of posters, and John Pertwee was particularly invested in the images that were used for posters for him. But by the 80s, there was obviously a big fan market, and fans wanted more than just the average photographs to put up on their wall. And again, Andrew Skilleter did these amazing paintings. They were profile prints, they were called, and I think a lot of them should have actually been used as the book covers, because they're a lot better than what we got on the books. But again, these are one of these series of posters that seemed incredibly expensive when they came out. I mean, a Target book was $2.95, and in the ABC shop, one of these posters was $4.95, which I just thought was outrageous. But it's one of those things that you don't see a lot of posters anymore. I think we have posters in the shop. What I mean by that is you don't see many art posters anymore. A lot of them are just photographic or computer generated. But back then, you can see very evocative of the 80s, that airbrushing had just come in a big way. And so in the 70s, where you had very painterly and stippled and ink work, suddenly it went over to that smoother, more polished, airbrushed look, which I kind of really like for monsters, but sometimes it brushes over details in faces, so they look a bit too smooth and polished. It also, for me, particularly that master poster, kind of looks like pinball machine art, which used a lot of airbrushing and is very evocative of the sort of pinball media. And another thing that was really popular in the 80s was recordings. And we've got a few of the different Doctor Who recordings on 45 and 12-inch and LP here. And they're great and colourful. A lot of the Doctor Who stuff through the 60s and 70s didn't have picture sleeves, or if they did, they were quite, I guess, average and plain. We had the theme come out on 45 when the theme changed in the early 80s, and they had ones with Tom Baker's and then Peter Davison and then Colin Baker's pictures. There's 3 versions there because there are different printings. There's US, UK, and I think there was an Australian one. And then, I don't know if you'd remember it, there was a song called Doctor Who Was Gonna Fix It that turned up out of nowhere by an Australian band, Bullamanka, I think. And I remember seeing it on Countdown and having an absolute meltdown that they were playing a Doctor Who song live on Countdown. And it is quite a cool song, but I don't think anyone would really remember it unless you were a fan. And Doctor Who got to the point where the series had been going long enough that the incidental music had become popular and desired. So the BBC released Doctor Who the Music up the top there, and it was so popular that they released Doctor Who the Music Volume 2. And this had different versions of the theme, different incidental musics, and eras, 60s, 70s, and 80s era. Interestingly enough, they released picture sleeves of them, and the picture sleeve there is the Australian Record Club one, which actually flips the picture accidentally. So you've got the Doctors in the wrong order, from the 5th Doctor to the 1st instead of the 1st Doctor to the 5th. And down the bottom is the second version of the Doctor Who the Music Volume 2, and that got a picture disc as well. And it's one of those things where I never thought that I would sit down and listen to incidental music for Doctor Who, but when I used to have the record player, I'd put them on. There's a couple of other independent bands there that released individual covers of the Doctor Who tune that are quite hard to find. And then there's the cassette versions of Doctor Who the Music and Doctor Who the Music Volume 2 that are probably harder to find than the actual vinyl versions. And here's some of the sundry, and this tells you sort of how popular Doctor Who was when you start getting money boxes and tea caddies, and you've got pens and mugs and pencil cases, and you've got a couple of different designs for the pencil case. So although Doctor Who merchandise had been quite popular before, what we're looking at now with Peter Davison is 3 years of merchandise, and this episode has gone as long as sort of the Tom Baker, where we were looking at 7 years of merchandise. So I think, as Russell was saying earlier, JNT was a bit of a master of publicity, and he realised that if merchandise was being produced, it was also free publicity to the show. So you'd often hear stories of someone going in to pitch an idea of what might make good Doctor Who merchandise and then walking out with the license to produce it themselves for nothing, just because the BBC knew that that would be free publicity to the show. So you'd get people getting licensed to make models and fan stuff, and it became official. And that put a lot of people on side with the production office, and everything was rosy between the fans and the BBC for a while at the beginning of the 80s. And here is one of the more unusual items from the era. This is the Doctor Who play tent. So what could be more cooler than getting a box, and when you open it, it's full of, you know, the plastic rods and the connectors and the vinyl tent, and you put it together and it's the TARDIS, and inside the TARDIS, when you go in, there's one panel of the TARDIS control printed onto the inside of the tent, so you can pretend you're traveling through time and space. And there's even a window out the back, so you can see out, and the window is blue plastic, so when you look out that window, everything outside is blue. So that brings us to the end of our look at the Peter Davison merchandise. Now, there is a lot of other stuff from the era, but it's probably easier if we look at that at another time under different umbrellas. Doctor Who took off in America, and Spirit of Light became a big distributor over there. But I think down the track we will look at fan-produced stuff and Doctor Who fandom, and that will be covered in that. And of course, there we have our next look into Doctor Who, which won't be next week, will be coming soon, is the second half of the 80s, or the middle of the 80s, which is Colin Baker, who was the sixth Doctor, who took over from Peter Davison in 1984. So I hope everyone's enjoyed our look back at the 80s. We didn't bring up celery once, I don't think, and I hope everyone has enjoyed seeing some of the stuff that was available at the time. Were you wrapped and enthralled, Dags?
Wrapped and enthralled. I'll think about that in a second. No, it was very well done. You did excellent work. And I was just going to say, Christy said she begged her mother for the tent and never got it. So there you go. And a good thing about, if it was a TARDIS tent, you know it'd be bigger on the inside. That's the most important thing. It's a 2-man tent, but you could fit 60 people in it. How good is that? Very, very good. All right. So yes, Thomas is impressed as always, as you should be, because Aaron puts a lot of time and effort into this particular show. So there you go. Anyway, we're going to buzz off. We've run way over time. So yeah, oh, look at this. Greg King is going, awesome, Aaron, absolutely fantastic. So there you go, very good. All right, we're going to buzz off, guys. We're going to leave you to it. We'll see you all next week. But there will be more 80s Doctor Who stuff coming up in the near future. So sit tight and just keep on watching. In the interim, make sure you keep all of your Doctor Who collectibles mint in box,
or rip them all out of the TARDIS.
All right, see you guys.
See you guys. Good night.